On 23rd of July, the party for the region of the Spokane set out, and after a voyage of much interest, succeeded in establishing the first interior trading post of the company. It was situated on a point of land about 3 miles long and 2 broad, formed by a junction of the Okanagan with the Columbia. In the meantime, the Indians near Astoria began to evince a hostile disposition, and the reason for this altered demeanor was soon found in the report of the loss of the Tonquin. Early in August, the settlers received intelligence of her fate. They now found themselves in a perilous situation, a mere handful of men on the savage coast, and surrounded by barbarous enemies. From their dilemma, they were relieved for the present by ingenuity of McDougall. The natives had a great dread of the smallpox which appeared among them in a few years before, sweeping off entire tribes. They believed it either an evil, either inflicted upon them by the Great Spirit or brought among them by the white men. Seizing upon this latter idea, McDougall assembled several of the chieftains, whom he believed to be Inissimo, and informing them that he had heard the treachery of their northern brethren in regard to the Tonquin, produced from his pocket a small bottle. "The white men among you," said he, "are few in number, it is true, but they are mighty in medicine. See here, in this bottle I hold the smallpox safely corked up. I have but to draw the cork and let loose the pestilence, to sweep man, woman, and child from the face of the earth." The chiefs were dismayed. They represented this to the quote-unquote great smallpox chief, that they were the firmest friends of the white men, that they had nothing to do with the villains who murdered the crew of the Tonquin, and that it would be unjust in uncorking the bottle to destroy the innocent with the guilty. McDougall was convinced. He promised not to uncork it until some overt act should compel him to do so. In this matter, tranquility was restored to the settlement. A large house was now built, and a frame of the schooner put together. She was named the Dolly, and was the first American vessel launched on the coast. But our limits will not permit us to follow too minutely the details of the enterprise. The adventurers kept up the spirit, sending out the occasional foraging parties in the Dolly and looking forward to the arrival of Mr. Hunt. So wore our way the year 1811 at the little post of Astoria. We now come to speak of the expedition by land. This will be remembered, it was to be conducted by Mr. Wilson Price Hunt, a native of New Jersey. He was represented as scrupulously upright and of amiable disposition and agreeable manners. He had never been in the heart of the wilderness, but having been for some time engaged in commerce at the St. Louis, furnishing Indian traders with goods, he had acquired much knowledge of the trade at second hand. Mr. Donald Mackenzie, another partner, was associated with him. He had been 10 years in the interior in the service of the Northwest Company and had much practice and experience in all the Indian concerns. In July 1810, the two gentlemen repaired to Montreal, where everything requisite to the expedition could be procured. Here they met with many difficulties, some of them which were thrown in their way by their rivals. Having succeeded, however, in laying in a supply of ammunition, provisions, and Indian goods, they embarked all on board a large boat, and with a very inefficient crew, the best to be procured, took their departure from St. Anne's near the extremity of the island near Montreal. Their course lay up the Ottawa and along a range of small lakes and rivers. On the 22nd of July, they arrived at Mackinac, situated on the Mackinac Island, at the confluence of Lakes Huron and Michigan. Here it was necessary to remain at some time to complete the assortment of Indian goods and engage more voyagers. While waiting to accomplish these objects, Mr. Hunt was joined on Mr. Ramsay Crooks, a gentleman whom he invited by letter to engage as partner in the expedition. He was native of Scotland and had served under the Northwest Company and had been engaged in private trading adventures among the various tribes of Missouri. Mr. Crooks represented in forcible terms the dangers to be apprehended from the Indians, especially the Blackfeet and the Sioux, and it was agreed to increase the number of the party to 60 upon arriving at St. Louis. 30 was the strength upon leaving Mackinac. This occurred on the 12th of August. The expedition pursued the usual route of the fur trader by Green Bay, Fox, and Wisconsin rivers to Prairie du Chien, and thence down the Mississippi to St. Louis, where they landed on the 3rd of September. Here Mr. Hunt was met with some opposition from an association called the Missouri Fur Company, and especially from its leader, Mr. Manuel Lisa. This company had a capital of about $40,000 and employed about 250 men. Its object was to establish posts along the upper part of the river and monopolize the trade. Mr. H. proceeded to strengthen himself against competition. He secured to Mr. Astor the services of Mr. Joseph Miller. This gentleman had been an officer of the United States Army, but had resigned on being refused a furlough and taken to trading with the Indians. He joined the association as a partner, and on account of his experience in general acquirements, Mr. Hunt considered him a valuable coadjutor. Several boatmen and hunters were now enlisted, but not until after a delay of several weeks. This delay in the previous difficulties at Montreal and Mackinac had thrown Mr. H. much behind in his original calculations, so that he found it would be impossible to effect his voyage up the Missouri during the present season. There was now every likelihood that the river would be closed before the party could reach its upper rivers. To winter, however, at St. Louis would be expensive. Mr. H therefore determined to push up on his way as far as possible to some point where game might be found in abundance, and there take up his quarters till spring. On the 21st of October, he set out. The party were distributed in three boats. 2 large Schenectady barges and a keel boat. By the 16th of November, they reached the mouth of the Nottawa, a distance of 450 miles, where they set up their winter quarters. Here, Mr. Robert McLellan, at the invitation of Mr. Hunt, joined the association as a partner. He was a man of vigorous frame and of restless and imperious temper, and had distinguished himself as a partisan under General Wayne. John Day also joined the company at this place, a tall and athletic hunter from the backwoods of Virginia. Leaving the main body at Nottawa, Mr. Hunt now returned to St. Louis for a reinforcement. He was again impeded by the machinations of the Missouri Fur Company, but finally succeeded in enlisting one hunter, some voyageurs, and a Sioux interpreter, Pierre Dorian. With these, after much difficulty, he got back to the encampment on the 17th of April. Soon after this period, the voyage up the river was resumed. The party now consists of nearly 60 persons, 5 partners, Hunt, Crooks, Mackenzie, Miller, and McLellan, 1 clerk, John Reed, 40 Canadian voyageurs, and several hunters. They embarked in 4 boats, one of which, of a large size, mounted a swivel and 2 howitzers. We did not intend, of course, to proceed with our travels throughout the vast series of adventure encountered in their passage throughout the wilderness. To the curious in these particulars, we recommend the book itself. No details more intentionally exciting are to be found in any works of travel within our knowledge. At times full of life and enjoying the whole luxury to be found in the career of the hunter. At times suffering every extremity of fatigue, hunger, thirst, anxiety, terror, and despair. Mr. Hunt still persisted in his journey, and finally brought it to a successful termination. A bare outline of the route pursued is all we can attempt. Proceeding up the river, our party arrived on the 28th of April at the mouth of the Nebraska, or Platte, the largest tributary of the Missouri, and about 600 miles above its junction with the Mississippi. They now halted for 2 days to supply themselves with oars and poles from the tough wood of ash, which is not to be found higher up the river. Upon the 2nd of May, 2 of the hunters insisted upon abandoning the expedition. And encamped in its vicinity, and returned to St. Louis. On the 10th, the party reached the Omaha village and encamped in its vicinity. This village is about 830 miles above St. Louis and on the west bank of the stream. Three men here deserted, but their places were luckily supplied by 3 others who were prevailed upon by liberal promises to enlist. On the 15th, Mr. Hunt left Omaha and proceeded. Not long afterward, a canoe was descried navigating by 2 white men. They proved to be 2 adventurers who, for some years past, had been hunting and trapping near the head of Missouri. Their names were Jones and McCarson. They were now on their way to St. Louis, but readily abandoned their voyage and turned their faces again towards the Rocky Mountains.